as a licensed clinical psychologist, I want to be very clear that no treatment for mental health should ever take place in a carceral facility. No treatment for substance use should ever take place in a carceral facility.
Does it ever cross your mind that something could be fundamentally wrong with our penal system when the United States, with less than 5% of the world's population, houses roughly 25% of its prisoners? This is the stark reality of mass incarceration, a system that, rather than rehabilitating, is often punitive, perpetuating cycles of crime and poverty. It's a maze with seemingly no exit, an issue deeply entrenched in societal norms, politics, and systemic prejudices. Enter the Awakening Exchange, an initiative birthed from a recognition of these systemic issues and a burning desire to address them. The Awakening Exchange is more than an organization. It's a beacon of hope, a community committed to healing the societal wounds that feed mass incarceration. Our mission is clear and unyielding: address the systemic problems that plague our penal system by fostering a collective consciousness that values empathy, rehabilitation, and restorative justice. Why does the Awakening Exchange exist, you might ask? Well, it's founded on three core pillars: addressing systemic issues, empowering communities, and promoting healing through love. We believe in the power of community, a community that stands together, learns together, and fights together for a just and compassionate society. A society that sees not just the crime, but the person behind it. A society that believes not in endless punishment, but in second chances. The Awakening Exchange aims to achieve this through education, advocacy, and the promotion of restorative practices. We're building an inclusive community, organizing educational initiatives, creating reentry training, and encouraging restorative justice practices. We are advocating for work opportunities and even remote work while an individual serves their time. You too can be part of this transformative journey. Spread the word about the Awakening Exchange, join our community, donate, and support our cause. Together we can rewrite the narrative on mass incarceration. We can replace the echoes of despair with stories of redemption and hope. We can break the chains of punitive justice and build bridges of healing and love. In the end, the Awakening Exchange is more than a mission. It's a calling to awaken the collective consciousness of our society, to challenge the status quo, and to strive for a justice system that truly serves justice. We are transforming from the inside out. It's a call to action. Will you answer? Will you?
When I started working at Cook County Jail in 2006, the population was about 10,000 men and women. The overwhelming majority were incarcerated on nonviolent offenses. They were mostly young, Black, and mostly males. And when you walk into those doors and you see hundreds of young Black men chained together, you see the hopelessness in their eyes. It does something to you.
What would be one word to describe this journey?
Heartache.
Enriching.
Gratitude.
Unapologeticness.
Hope.
Elevating.
Passion.
Resilience.
I say transformation.
Determination.
Intention.
My word is compassion.
Rebirth.
Intentional.
It's bigger than just walking down your probation and parole. It's changing your mindset, your lifestyle, and never returning to prison again. It's the reentry journey with Cardale Sims.
Welcome to another episode of the Reentry Journey. I am your host, Cardale Sims. And before we get started with today's guest, this episode is brought to you by OnSo. That's right, inspire, motivate, and support others. That's what I do. That's what I represent. And I want to give a shout out to the CEO, DJ Walker at OnSo.
OnSo is an acronym for inspire, motivate,
and support others. Also, I'm so in the dictionary or English terms is to a great extent, beyond normal. And I took that and spun it in a positive way to make it to where everything you do is extra. Everything you do is above average. It's going hard, is striving to be the very best version of yourself.
Let's get into our guest today. I'm so happy to have our guests. On the reentry journey, we have a lot of our guests. They are formerly incarcerated, sharing their journeys, but we also have a lot of people on the show that come in that work in the criminal justice field, that work in the reentry space, that work with children of those that are incarcerated as well. So let's just bring my guest in. In 2018, my guest, Dr. Nneka Jones Tapia, was named Chicago's Beyond first ever Leader in Residence, a fellowship for community leaders focused on tackling significant challenges facing Chicago's youth. In partnership with Chicago Beyond and the community it serves, her primary focus is on young people experiencing trauma, including those whose parents have been incarcerated. Since joining the Chicago Beyond team, she collaborated to launch Beyond Incarceration, a pilot program with the Cook County Sheriff's Office, the Chicago Children's Museum, and Lurie Hospital Center for Childhood Resilience, focused on reducing the stigma and trauma that surrounds young people impacted by parental incarceration. She also led Chicago Beyond's partnership with the Cook County Sheriff's Office to reduce harms caused by correctional institutions. Additionally, she played an integral role in Chicago Beyond's work with Chicago Public Schools to foster a more healing-centered school district. Nneka previously served as the warden of Cook County Jail, where she spearheaded a number of reforms aimed at reducing the number of people held at the institution. Prior to her 11-year tenure at the Cook County Jail in various roles, she worked in several community mental health agencies throughout Virginia and North Carolina. Her focus was the provision of community mental health service to the African American community, youth, and adults. Without any further ado, welcome to the reentry journey, Dr. Nneka Jones Tapia. Welcome to the reentry journey.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
I apologize on the name slip up. I don't know how I got that wrong because my wife's name is Nneka.
Oh, wow. Then she's an incredible woman, no doubt.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. So how's everything going with you today?
Everything is good. Thank you. How about you?
Oh, I'm doing great. It's Tuesday, got over the first hump on the week, Monday. You know how Mondays go. Tuesday a little bit more relaxed after Mondays. And so I see you have an extensive background working in correctional facilities. What initially drew you to this field, and what have been some of the biggest challenges?
I believe that nothing happens by chance. Everything happens the way that it's supposed to. And I think what drew me into corrections was my early experiences with people I loved being incarcerated and seeing what the carceral system did to them and to my family, to my whole community. There were so many people I knew who ended up in the system, and I just saw it devastate our whole community. And I knew that I wanted to do something to support the people who were incarcerated in the system, because I felt like so many people forgot about them once they were behind that wall, and never wanted people to feel like they were forgotten or expendable, and wanted to support people when they were probably at one of the worst moments of their lives. And so when I was in college, I decided to study psychology. And I first started as a biomed major. I was going to be a medical doctor, but I took my first biology course and realized that was not the trajectory for me. And it happened that at that same time, a family member of mine was incarcerated, and I saw the deterioration that the system had on him. And that was really what I think catapulted me into a career in psychology and specifically in correctional mental health, and wanted to, do all I could to support people and families and communities. And you asked about challenges, you name it. When I started in the field, there really wasn't an educational track for correctional mental health. I had to kind of carve it out on my own. And as a part of that, uh, was granted an internship at the Cook County Jail in Chicago. Now, I'm a Southern girl. I'm from North Carolina, so I had never been to Chicago. And in that internship, realized that the devastation that I saw in my family and my community was magnified across this country, and knew that I was in the right field. Challenges, they were plenty. I can probably go on for much longer than the show will allow to talk about the challenges.
And you say in North Carolina, right?
I was raised in North Carolina, born and raised in North Carolina, but moved to Chicago to complete my internship at Cook County Jail, and have been here pretty much ever since.
And so, in your role as warden at Cook County Jail, you led several reform efforts. Can you talk about some of those changes you implemented and the impact that they had?
Sure, I'll take a step back and give you, I think, a little bit of background on why I implemented the reforms that I did. When I started at the jail, my role was to support the people who were incarcerated. And as a mental health clinician, a big part of that role was individual, providing individual support to the person. And what I later came to realize was not only was the system negatively impacting people incarcerated, but it was also negatively impacting the staff. And it far surpassed an individual level. Like, these were systemic issues that I was seeing. And so when I became warden, I knew that the work couldn't be individualized because it really wasn't a problem for the individual or within the individual. The problem was the system itself. And so what I wanted to focus on, and what I did focus on, was healing supports and wellness supports for people in the system and when they left. So one of the things that we created during my tenure was a mental health transition center, where we introduced community back into the lives of people who were incarcerated, which doesn't usually happen, right? Like, most correctional facilities remove people from community and disconnect people from community far beyond what the walls itself does, like emotionally disconnects, socially disconnects. And so we wanted to re-engage families and communities in the lives of the people who were incarcerated. And so we brought employers in, and educational programs in, and wellness programs in, and really started to help support the person while they were still incarcerated to prepare for life on the outside. We did something very similar for the staff. We developed an employee-led wellness program for staff, because again, like, the impacts that I saw within the system really impacted everyone that was touched by it.
Right. And that is a major step, because I've been in and out of prison probably since 1999 as far as prison. I was in foster home. I've been in every form of justice system there is, since foster home, juvenile detention center, county jail, state prison, and federal prison. And throughout my run inside them systems, there never was a strong mental health even to today, with me going in and running programs in prison and speaking in prisons and county, you it's never really like a really solid, strong mental health program or advocacy for the mental health.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't think people in the broader public realize that people are coming into the system having profound experiences with trauma, and people are being re-victimized in the system. And so the system itself being traumatizing, it requires reimagination that will allow for healing. Most people who lead correctional systems consider their job to be about keeping people contained. And it's more than
Right.
that, because every other system that people have encountered before they have encountered the carceral system has failed them. And so once a person gets to the carceral system, in order for us to really set people up for success, like we as a larger community have to push these carceral systems to support healing so that people returning to our community come back well and whole and protected.
Exactly. I always say that, just kind of like you said, it's some type of mental trauma that we're dealing with that may lead to our substance abuse reason or may lead to us acting out that led us to be incarcerated, and then we have to deal with what goes on inside the whole totality of the system, going to court, lawyers, this and that, and going to prison and traveling, getting put out in the woods somewhere, and then deal with everything else to go in prison without any of the previous mental health or the mental trauma that you came into the system with being dealt with, nor the current trauma that you're dealing with being dealt with, and then you just released
Yeah.
out into a world that's sped up 10 times the last time that you had went in. And I hear you talk about the staff, and some people might ask, what type of trauma or it affects that working inside of a correctional institutions have on them. Can you explain that? Can you break that down for us?
Um, I started working in corrections in September 2006. And it was around August of 2007 that I experienced the first suicide of someone who was incarcerated. Now, at this time, let me go back and explain a little bit about Cook County Jail for people who may not be familiar. At that time, it was the largest single site jail in the country. There were about 10,000 people who were housed there. It spans across 90 acres in downtown Chicago. I was the only psychologist on that 90-acre compound that Saturday morning, and I received a call that a gentleman had just died by suicide. And they wanted me to come over to talk with the men who he was housed with to be sure everyone was okay. And I remember walking to that living unit, ill equipped. At this point, I'm still green. I have less than a year on the job. And I remember walking into that living unit and going cell to cell to talk with all of the men who were incarcerated with him. And each one told a different story about their experiences with this young man who had just taken his life. Then I had to console the officer who had just found him, and he was almost inconsolable. And then I read the letter that he wrote to his family members. I listened to the final phone call he had with his family members. And it was my job in that moment to help the leadership to understand what could have been done differently so that this young man didn't take his life. I did not walk away the same. Like, that is what working in this system does to people. Like, people who work in this system are forced to see, hear about, and experience themselves violence, death, serious injury, and nobody should have to experience that. People living there, people who are incarcerated there, people who are working there, but that is something that each of those groups has to deal with over and over again, right? And so the system doesn't discriminate against who it impacts. And I remember going home that day and needing to go to the grocery store and just couldn't get myself out of the car to go to the grocery store. Couldn't show up the same with my family because I was re-experiencing that young man's death over and over again. And it wasn't long after that before I experienced the death of someone else. And so the system weighs on the people who are incarcerated in it, it weighs on the staff, and it deteriorates all of us.
Exactly, man. Ooh. So another question would be, what are some of the biggest misconceptions about that people have about incarcerated individuals and their families?
If we listen to most public media, many elected officials, I believe we will believe that people who are incarcerated in the system are not human, are monsters, don't care, like, don't deserve freedom, don't deserve to have like their value realized. And I mean, I worked in one of the toughest systems in the country. And while I did encounter some people who elicited fear in me, I'm not going to lie, once I got to know them and I got to understand their story, like the countless incidents of pain that they endured with no respite, the many times they were not given the opportunity to heal from the different things that happened with them, like I began to understand why they saw the world as they did. And the psychology behind that is when we overexpose people to trauma and stress, whether it's in community, in the carceral system, when we overexpose people to stress and violence, their brains change, like the chemistry in the brains change in such a way that they begin to see the world as violent. And when we believe that violence will come to us, it's a normal human response to act first. And when we view the world as violent, we can misconceive a lot of things. So situations and incidents that could be completely benign, we can see as negative and potentially threatening because of our experiences and how our brains have been changed. And so people will misconceive someone as being a monster when they are responding in a normal human way to an overexposure of violence and trauma. And so people are people, like There is great value. There is great ingenuity and talent, gifts of people who are incarcerated and their families, and no one is irredeemable.
And I'm glad you said that because I was on a call last week, and the guy, he was formerly incarcerated. He was talking about building a program in this particular area, and he was talking about starting with the children. And somebody had said, "Well, what about the guys coming out?" But in the middle of that, he was like, "Yeah, some of them we're just gonna have to let go because some of them are not redeemable." And I'm like, "What?" I said, "Man," I got on there. I said, "I'm glad somebody felt like I was redeemable after my ninth time I was inside of a county jail or a prison system, because sometimes people just don't get it right on the first, second, third, fourth time. But everybody is redeemable. So I'm definitely glad that you said that, because some people do believe that some people are not redeemable that get incarcerated.
There's some people who I think require more healing, but when given that space and when allowed the opportunity to work through a lot of the things that they have seen and dealt with, like there's a human on the other end of that. And there's a family on the other end of that. And I refuse to believe and have never encountered anyone who made me feel like there wasn't an opportunity for that person to make better decisions.
Right. I agree. And so now you're focused on supporting youth impacted by parental incarceration. What are some of the unique challenges that these young people face, and how are you working to help them with the challenges on that end?
So at Chicago Beyond, we're really taking a systems level approach to supporting whole style changes in correctional facilities and supporting young people who have experienced parental incarceration is one area. But we're really using a framework that we developed with people formerly incarcerated and with people who worked in the system to really shift the conditions that exist in these systems to really help people to thrive. And one of the primary ways people thrive is by having that positive family engagement, to have connection with the people who they love and who love them. And so we partnered with the Cook County Sheriff's Office in 2019, along with uh, the Chicago Children's Museum, to develop a more trauma-informed approach to visitation. And we um, had a group of incarcerated fathers that were able to visit with their children and families at the Chicago Children's Museum, which is at Navy Pier, downtown Chicago. And in that, we brought all the key stakeholders to the table before we did this. We brought the incarcerated parents to the table. We brought families to the table. We brought correctional staff and administrators to the table to all talk about the vision that we had for shifting visitation and creating this positive family experience, as well as the fears that people had. And we helped to minimize some of those fears. So, like, for example, some of the incarcerated dads were scared to tell their children that they were incarcerated. They had been locked up for months, and for some of them more than a year, and their children didn't know where they were. So they hadn't even had visitation with their families because um, they hadn't communicated that with their children. So we employed the services of a mental health clinician to help the parents to deliver difficult news. Some of the staff were concerned that, having dads who were incarcerated dressed in plain clothes and out of handcuffs at Navy Pier in downtown Chicago could result in some incidents. And so we helped them to think about how they could follow through on security practices that wouldn't traumatize children and families. So, for example, how could they ensure no weapons were being brought in without having to do an invasive pat down search of families. Instead, they had them walk through a metal detector that had the alarm silenced so that it didn't scare the children. So we worked through things like that. We trained all of the staff in a trauma informed approach and like how to engage effectively with people who had been exposed to trauma and gave them tools to manage their own trauma. Um, and by the time the day of the visit came, there was this moment where the museum was filled with mental health staff, and museum staff, and correctional staff, everyone dressed in plain clothes. And the dads were in the museum dressed in plain clothes as well. And when the doors of the museum opened and their children ran in to hug them, some of them for the first time in over a year, like all of that security stuff and everything went out the window. When I tell you we were overcome with emotion because it was a beautiful reminder of the humanity that exists in people who I think larger society, which we talked about earlier, sometimes tosses to the side. And it was just a reminder of the beauty that exists when we allow people to be connected. So that was one of the things that we did. We work with other correctional systems to implement our holistic safety framework in other areas, like reducing isolation in their systems. And so we have thankfully been working with about 5 correctional institutions to date from across the country, employing the tenets of our framework.
Oh man, I can only imagine the emotion when the doors open. I was just smiling thinking about it, getting emotional just hearing it and picturing it in my mind. Man, that's a beautiful thing right there. Just man, that I'm yeah, I like
Oh, can I make you smile more? Can I make you smile more? So
yeah,
from that pilot visitation experience, we helped the Cook County Sheriff's Office to now have all trauma informed policies around visitation. And now, at this day, everyone who was housed at the Cook County Jail has access to contact visitation that is child friendly and family centered. Like that all came from that pilot visitation, our ability to work with them so that everyone housed at the institution has access to that. Everyone doesn't visit with their children and families at the Chicago Children's Museum, but where they do visit with their families at the jail is much more conducive to family connection than what was previously the case. So the kudos to the Cook County Sheriff's Office for being willing to change their
it
visitation.
ain't the Navy pier, but hey, it beats sitting behind the glass
Yes.
and having that visit. You said that the children program of the incarcerated parents was just a part of Beyond Incarceration. Can you talk about the other things that you all do as well?
Yeah, so we're working with a few other correctional facilities to implement our holistic safety framework. And we're looking at 4 areas in particular, and it all centers around reducing isolation that incarceration usually causes. So, reducing physical isolation of people incarcerated. Like, how can we support these correctional institutions just letting people out of their cell? With COVID, with staffing challenges, a lot of them are keeping people locked up for most of the day. It's also focused on the emotional isolation of people incarcerated. Like, what wellness resources do people have to help them to thrive in the institution and outside of it? Reducing emotional isolation for staff, like we talked about the trauma that staff endures. I don't think most people probably don't know this. I will share that correctional staff on average live about 20 years less than people in the general population.
Oh
Like,
wow.
people in the general population have a life expectancy of age 79. The life expectancy of a correctional officer is age 59. So when we talk about the impact of trauma, that is why we also focus on the emotional wellness of staff, because the system is literally killing people, people who are incarcerated in it and people who work in it. And then the last area of focus in our work with correctional systems is like reducing the interpersonal isolation between staff and people incarcerated. There's this us versus them mentality that, in my experiences, takes the focus away from both of these groups working together to shift the system. And instead, they're so focused on battling each other when the real enemy is the system itself. And so we work with institutions on those 4 areas.
Oh man, you opened up my eyes on the staff side and the life expectancy. Never knew that, and that's crazy. But then again, it shows the impact of what you're saying, the system.
Yeah. You know that research also shows that for every 1 year a person is incarcerated, they lose an average of 2 years off of their lifespan. And so, like,
Whew.
that
Oh,
that's
I'm bad.
to the gravity.
Oh, I'm doing bad, man. Oh,
Well, a lot of us are. I worked in the system for 11 years. Add that up. There are people who are sitting in the Cook County Jail right now that have been awaiting trial. So they have not been found guilty. They have been awaiting trial for 10 years. There are people sitting there
wow.
today for 10 years waiting to find out if they're going to be found guilty or not. I mean, this system this system is failing all of us.
Exactly. It really is. It really is. And especially in the like you're the I'm gonna be honest, you're maybe the first guest that I've had that um that wasn't incarcerated and is coming on and talking about the mental health side of incarceration. Because like I said earlier, in all the institutions I've been in my time in and out of prison, it wasn't no mental health system in there.
More than 2.7 million children in this country have a parent who's incarcerated right now. Like, those numbers are so astonishing that we have to think about universal healing supports for children and families. Like, it's really not our business if a family member is dealing with someone who is incarcerated, but what is our business is how we show up in the lives of our neighbors and the children we're surrounded with, and understanding that people are dealing with a host of difficult situations. Like, we have to think about the healing practices that we have as individuals, as communities, as organizations, and show up for each other in better ways.
Right. And what role do you think empathy and compassion play in that part right there?
I've seen a lot of people who worked in the system become incarcerated in the system. And I've seen a lot of people who've been incarcerated in the system end up working in the system.
Mm,
And I say that to say that we never know what tomorrow holds.
right.
It's best that we engage with each other in the way we would want people to engage with us. So empathy and compassion is paramount. Humanity covers all of that. And as long as we treat people with dignity and respect and see people as valuable, which we all are,
Hmm.
then, I think we as a larger society and a broader community can see our way through this epidemic of mass incarceration.
Okay. And because we're talking about the communities, and we're talking about the criminal justice side. And with you work with Chicago Public Schools. You also work with Cook County Sheriff's Office. How do you think we can build a stronger connections between the justice system and the community organizations?
So Chicago Beyond has had ability to partner with these systems.
Okay.
And because these systems have allowed us to partner with them, I'd like to think that they have experienced positive change and have seen positive change. And so I think it's really incumbent on these systems, carceral systems, educational systems, to open up their doors to community partners. Like there's a lot of wisdom in community. There's a lot of expertise and value in community. These systems have to be willing to engage. And we know from our experiences with the carceral system that a lot of jails and prisons aren't willing to let community in. And so,
No.
right? But I think we are at a point now where correctional leaders are understanding they cannot see their way out of this alone. Like they have to engage community, and community must include the people incarcerated in their system and the staff who work
Right.
in there.
Yeah, true indeed. Because them correctional institutions and they don't like really working with the communities too much, really, or getting involved. But I think here, because I sit on a few boards and work with a lot of institutions and private institutions as well. And one of the things that I've been seeing here over the last 6 or 7 months is they're trying to find ways to be more transparent and create a better family environment for those who's coming to visit and those incarcerated and their families as well.
Good, good. I think again, like I think we have ourselves in such a dire circumstance with the current state of jails and prisons that
Hmm.
facility administrators and elected officials understand that they have to do something different. They can't continue the status quo. The consequences are too great.
Right. And so, what gives you hope about the future of criminal justice reform? What changes would you like to see within the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
What gives me hope is that there are people like you and so many people who have experienced this system that are leading conversations and policy reform discussions. Like that is how we see our way out of this. Like people who have experienced the system have to be brought into those policy making decisions. And those policy making decisions and conversations have to include decarceration as a first line defense. They have to
Mm.
include reimagining corrections and what it's used for and what it's about in those conversations. And I think that gives me hope, to know that there are people like you on the front lines of this work.
Mm. Okay. And if you could reinvent our justice system, if you could reinvent it from the ground up, they gave you the opportunity to say you could reinvent the whole thing from the ground up, all the way up. What would be your top priorities, and what does your vision of that ideal system? What does it look like?
As someone who has worked in a correctional system, as someone who has led a correctional system, as someone who has been a visitor of a correctional system, I would create a world where correctional systems don't exist.
Mm.
I would create a world where we have mechanisms for accountability and healing and not punishment. Violence
I like
begets
that.
violence.
I like
And
that.
healing begets healing.
Mm. And so I always ask this question to every guest that I have on. It's always the final question. This question, um, I get I've gotten a lot of different answers. So it always stuns people what this question is. But the question is, if you had one word, we talked about your story, talked about all the work that you're putting in, the programs, your focus, the partnerships. If you have one word to describe your journey all the way up to this point, what would that one word be and why?
Freedom.
Mm,
Freedom, because I realize now that I was emotionally and mentally confined by this system before I even started working in it.
mm,
And it was when I started working in it that things got so bad that I realized just how the system weighed me down. And since I have been at Chicago Beyond and been able to approach justice from the outside, I have experienced a freedom of like empowerment, a freedom of understanding the greatness that exists and creating pathways for that greatness to come to surface in myself and in other people. And in that is freedom.
mm. Freedom. It's a powerful word. Mm. Well, this wrapped up another episode of the Reentry Journey. I would like to thank Dr. Nneka for coming on, sharing her story, her journey, her expertise. Like I said earlier, I think what you're doing in the mental health aspect is very important and impactful and is really much needed inside our institutions. I can think of so many people that I can put you in touch with that um, overseas programs and things inside institutions that I would see you sit down at the table with, because I was just speaking with someone about this a couple weeks ago. How that there really is no solid. I don't know any outside of Beyond Incarceration. I know now, but prior to that, I did haven't known any solid uh, program or foundation that really locked in on the mental health side of incarceration and are on the inside doing some amazing work. So I really want to say thank you for that, and I really honor you for that as well.
Thank you. You know, our framework is the holistic safety framework, and your audience can read more about it in our publication, Do I Have the Right to Feel Safe? And that's at chicagobeyond.org. So would love to sit down with anyone you want to put me in touch with, and we are happy to be thought partners in this work.
Mm. And so, for those who are going to be tuning in, how can they get more information about you or all the things that you do? How can they go and find that information and get involved?
We're on all of the social media channels, chicagobeyond.org, and you can connect with us on those social media channels and follow us for our newsletter.
Mm. Yeah, we was in Chicago. We did part of our tour. 2023 for this year. I did a on the inside empowerment workshop tour. Oh, I wish we could have met earlier, because I would have loved to have you on that tour to talk about mental health and wellness and the trauma. We will continue. So now that we know each other and we got access to each other when we go out, I would love to have you host a couple workshops on the tour about that specific topic. I think you'll do a great job. Because yeah, we was just in Cook County in May. We got the opportunity to go in, me and the team. I got one of the guy on my team. He's from Chicago. His name is Aaron Smith. So
I
me
know
and
Aaron.
Aaron, and if you know Aaron, yeah,
I
Aaron,
know
yeah,
Aaron. So
that's my
one
guy.
of the things
Yeah.
we didn't talk about is, we're a philanthropic organization, and we invest in people and organizations, and we invested in escaping the odds.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Aaron, man. I've been knowing Aaron for probably about 4 years now. Not too
Um,
long after he got out of prison. We had just connected this through social media outlets, and we had did each other's podcasts, and we kind of like mentored each other, because I had been out maybe a year or so before he had gotten out, And so we just mentor each other. And then when I started talking about doing a tour, he wanted to come along and do the documentary side. So it only made sense. And so this year was the first time we actually met each other physically going on the tour together. So it was real. It was a real good thing, man. We had a great time. He set us up for us to go into Cook County and do the tour there, and we did an amazing. We did amazing. So yeah, that's my guy. That's my brother right there, Aaron Smith.
Ours too. Chicago Beyond made that connection for him to get into Cook County Jail. So,
Oh, man,
it's a
we
small
appreciate
world.
it. It's a small world. It really is a small world. So, thanks a lot for coming on, being a guest. Thanks a lot again for the work that you're doing. Like I said, if anyone I can connect you to, I feel free to do it. Like I said, I think this is important. I've always wondered like who really focuses in on that lane, and then like everybody in the reentry field, like you just can't focus in on that lane and not be qualified, And so to have someone who's qualified and can relate and really doing the work in that, man, it's important. So once again, thank you. I really, really do appreciate that.
Thank you, Cardell.
So this is another episode of the Reentry Journey. Thank you for everyone tuned in. And until next time, for all the guys that's behind the walls, all the women that's behind the walls, always remember what I always say. Don't let the limitation of your background reduce the height of your potential. Outgrow what you were born into. Thanks for tuning in to the Reentry Journey. And until next time, we will see you when we see you.
Shawty press, shawty press, shawty fine, shawty fine. Yeah. Face card valid, she gon' slay it every time. Independent, on the grind, Yeah. All about the money, so she never got time. Shawty press, shawty fine, shawty fine. Yeah. Face card valid, she gon' slay it every time. Independent, on the grind, Yeah. All about the money.
What would be one word to describe this journey?
Heartache.
Enriching.
Gratitude.
Unapologeticness.
Hope.
Elevating.
Passion.
Resilience.
I say transformation.
Determination.
Intention. My word is compassion.
Rebirth.
Intentional.
It's bigger than just walking down your probation and parole. It's changing your mindset, lifestyle, and never returning to prison again. It's the reentry journey with Cardell Sims.